Surviving in the wild isn't just a goal, it's a full-blown battle. This isn't a game, and it's definitely not for the weak. 10 contestants are dropped into a freezing wilderness, where they must fight against harsh nature and their own limits for a shot at $500,000. They'll have to give it their all, using every ounce of skill, courage, and mental toughness, because one small mistake could cost them everything. Do you think they can survive for 100 days? Comment below who you think will win and why. The most intense survival competition starts now. Unlike the male contestants in the show, most of whom have already been able to enjoy hearty meat meals, 2 out of the 3 female contestants, Rose and Michelle, are still struggling with hunger. They have been surviving on plants and roots just to get through each day. Hopefully, they'll soon manage to have a proper meal if they want to stay in the competition. It's now day 13, and 9 contestants remain in the competition. Teresa woke up early, simply to warm her backside by the fire. Besides that, her shelter still needed more improvements. She gathered fir tree bark to build a wall around her camp, then covered it with soil. This method would help keep the heat inside much better. Feeling that the inside was too empty, she also built a simple bed using sturdy branches. Sure, it looked nothing like the cozy bed she had at home, but given the harsh conditions, it was already a huge achievement. Now let's check in with Nate, who's come up with a crazy idea. Since his fishing bait kept getting washed back to shore by the waves, he decided to build a small fishing dock. After 3 busy hours, he finally managed to complete his mini dock and excitedly rushed out to the lake to test it. However, the results were pretty disastrous. One by one, the support posts collapsed, and the whole structure slowly fell apart. Turns out, building a dock isn't nearly as easy as he thought. Nate returned to his camp looking quite disappointed, but if he wants to win that $500,000 prize, he'll have to pull himself together quickly. Calter is in the middle of upgrading his boat. Let's take a look at how it looked before. Now he's added floating pontoons on both sides to give the boat better balance. Excited, Calter launched his newly improved vessel into the water, and wow, the difference was incredible. The boat's balance and speed were absolutely perfect. But suddenly, an uninvited guest appeared, a gray bear, staring intensely at him. Even worse, the bear started slowly approaching. In a panic, Calter quickly fired off a flare to scare it away. That was way too close for comfort. The competition has moved into day 15. Jordan was relaxing by the lakeside, enjoying some of his smoked fish. After his meal, he returned to camp and started working on a wooden door. However, he wasn't fully satisfied with it just yet. Jordan crafted a wooden hinge, carefully attached it to the wall at a measured spot, and finally mounted the door in place. Done. Next, he even made a wooden door handle, allowing the door to lock from the inside. Now, his shelter feels much safer and cozier. Meanwhile, Rose still hadn't made much progress. She had to survive by eating seaweed to stave off hunger. At this point, even catching a single fish had become her biggest dream. Rose wove some branches into a makeshift fish trap and threw it into the water, just about 2 meters from shore, without even using any bait. Would any fish happen to swim by? The next morning, Rose eagerly rushed to check her trap, but unsurprisingly, what she caught was a whole lot of disappointment. She had no choice but to continue eating berries and hope that luck would eventually smile on her. Meanwhile, Nate was enjoying a cup of tea he had brewed from pine needles, and his body suddenly felt revitalized. Fueled by this burst of energy, he returned to his grand project. Learning from his previous mistakes, things seemed to go much more smoothly this time. Once he was confident the structure was stable, he carried it down to the water. Nate added several long wooden planks extending from the shore to the dock support. At last, the fishing dock he had been dreaming of was finally completed, and he was absolutely thrilled. Now it was time to set up his fishing rod and see how effective it would be. While waiting, Nate returned to his shelter and sipped some more pine needle tea. Having not eaten for days, this tea was all he had to keep his hunger at bay. Fortunately, his efforts paid off. After just 3 hours, a fish finally took the bait. Though it wasn't huge, it was more than enough to lift his spirits. Nate returned to camp, placed the salmon directly over the coals, and treated himself to a delicious, well-earned grilled fish meal. The competition has now reached day 18, and the number of contestants has hardly changed. The remaining 9 survivalists are still pushing through and, in some ways, even enjoying the journey. Although a few of them are facing serious challenges, it's all just part of the game. Who do you think will be the next to tap out? Let's keep watching to find out. One contestant was up at the crack of dawn, ready to take his boat out. Can you guess who it is? Of course, it's Calter. He paddled out to the middle of the lake to fish, dropped his line into the water, then simply lay back on his boat, quietly waiting for a bite. After a refreshing midday nap, he woke up to find a small salmon on his line. It wasn't as big as he had hoped, but it proved that his strategy was working. Jordan was feeling an intense wave of homesickness. He tried to stay as busy as possible to distract himself from this overwhelming emotion. Using a branch, he made a simple smoking pipe, filled it with some leaves, and took a deep puff, hoping it would calm his mind. He then went down to the lake, sat in front of the camera, and spoke to the audience, reminding them to like and subscribe so they wouldn't miss any details of the show. But that wasn't what was on his mind. Deep down, he was really missing his wife and kids. The isolation in the wild was starting to take its toll on him. After days of contemplation, Jordan finally decided to call the program organizers. It was with great regret that he had to leave. He had been one of the top contenders for the championship, but with a heavy heart, he exited the competition. Let's move on from Jordan's sad departure and check in on Clay. He's going through the toughest days of his survival journey. Despite trying for days, Clay hasn't caught a single fish. Realizing something needs to change, he decides to switch fishing spots and even builds a new fishing tool. After 2.5 hours of hard work, he finishes crafting a simple but handy fishing net. Excited, Clay rushes to the lake, ready to test it out. Unfortunately, luck isn't on his side. He stands on the shore, fishing for 3 long hours, but catches absolutely nothing. Out of options, Clay heads back to camp empty-handed. Looks like he'll be surviving on wild berries for a while longer. Hang in there, Clay. Let's check in with Michelle. She's searching for something along the lakeshore, flipping over rocks and inspecting every little nook. Finally, she finds a few freshwater snails. Back at camp, she cooks them in a pot. The meat is tender, chewy, and full of flavor. Even though Michelle has spent days trying to catch fish without success, she now plans to weave a fish trap from branches to boost her chances. Once finished, she tosses it straight into the lake, without even bothering to add bait, hoping something might wander inside. Back at camp, she moves her entire kitchen setup outdoors, believing it's safer to cook under the open sky. However, she starts to notice her physical condition worsening. She feels more exhausted than before. If this keeps up, it could become serious. The next morning, Michelle eagerly heads to the lake to check her trap, clinging to a shred of hope. But when she arrives, she sees the trap has been disturbed by something. Definitely not the result she was hoping for. Her final bit of hope vanishes. Michelle can only sit silently at camp, staring blankly into the distance, lost in disappointment. What's Matt up to? Turns out he's heading to the lake to fish. He casts his line once, twice, 3 times, and many more, but all he reels in is an empty hook each time. Frustrated, Matt jumps into the water to try and catch fish by hand. Sadly for him, the lake water is freezing cold. So much for that bright idea, buddy. He climbs back onto the shore, keeps casting, and prays for a miracle. In surprise, the sea gods finally grant him a tiny little fish. Well, better than nothing. Matt returns to camp, grills the fish over a charcoal fire, filling the air with delicious aromas, and enjoys the small but hard-earned feast. After more than 8,000 minutes, Chico finally finished forging his legendary sword. It looked tiny, more like a toy you'd find at a supermarket. He even showed off a few sword moves, and honestly, it was a bit worrying. Testing it on wood, though, it turned out to be surprisingly useful. But that's not all. Since the start of the competition, Chico has lost over 22 pounds. At this rate, he might turn into a supermodel by the end of the show. To stop this from happening, he decided to build a fish trap. While he was working, he suddenly heard a strange noise from behind. Could it be a ghost? Nope, it was a giant grizzly bear lurking near camp. Even though Chico looked strong, facing a grizzly was another story. Quickly, he pulled out his whistle and blew it as hard as he could. Amazingly, the bear ran off, probably forgetting its flip-flops in the panic. Relieved, Chico went back to work. He took his fish basket to the lake, stuffed a few rocks inside, and tossed it into the water, hoping that some small fish would fall in love with their new dream home. Nate has been wandering around restlessly these days because he hasn't been sleeping well. He was hoping the organizers would grant him a nice mattress and a soft pillow so he could finally get a good night's sleep. However, after an emergency meeting, the production team flat out rejected Nate's request. It seems like I talked too much, so he ended up making himself a mattress out of rope. The tiny fish from a few days ago was basically not enough to fill his stomach, so Matt thought about finding some mushrooms under the grass he had just dug up. However, unexpectedly, a swarm of hornets suddenly flew out from the bushes. He pretended to be a rock, standing motionless so they wouldn't recognize him. But who would have thought that the hornets would sting him without missing a single hit? After failing so many times, he started to doubt his best friend, and a more negative attitude began to take root in his mind. That evening, Matt sat in front of the camera and shared his thoughts about the harshness of the competition, saying that not everyone could overcome the challenges here. The next morning, he returned to the lake to fish with high hopes, but it seemed like this would be his last time fishing here. In a moment of despair, Matt called the production team directly and withdrew from the competition under the pressure of both food and mental exhaustion. He hoped that after returning home, he would continue to train and come back stronger for the next season. When she reached Michelle's spot, she looked much thinner compared to when she first started. It was clear that fishing here wasn't effective. She could only bring her bow and arrows into the forest, hoping for a stroke of luck. However, she didn't get far before feeling dizzy and had to sit down to rest for a while. After taking a large loop, she finally returned to camp. Suddenly, a grouse appeared from a distance. She carefully picked up her bow and arrows and crept toward it, but as soon as she was in shooting range, it disappeared. With the pain in her chest, she realized she probably couldn't continue. In the end, Michelle called the show to announce her withdrawal from the competition, never expecting things to turn out so badly for her. It seems like everything is happening very quickly. In this episode alone, 3 contestants, Jordan, Matt, and Michelle, have withdrawn from the competition, all feeling regret and disappointment. This just shows that survival in the wild is no ordinary game. It requires knowledge, skills, and experience to face the challenges of life and nature. Who will win the $500,000 prize? Leave a comment with the name of the contestant who has impressed you the most. And now, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the latest episodes of the show. See you in the next episode.